If you want to watch this episode, first subscribe to my channel. If you love your God, subscribe and comment my channel. If you love your parents, subscribe, comment, and like my video. If you want to see this episode in advance, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications on. I hope you subscribe to my channel. Here's your video. Grab a popcorn and enjoy your fresh new episode.
CNA spoke with the creator and several of the cast members on the teal carpet about the future of the show and what viewers could expect from Season 5, which centers on the events of Holy Week, when fans of the hit series The Chosen assembled at the Orlando World Center Marriott in Orlando, Florida, for the second annual Chosen Con in late September. Show creator, director, and writer Dallas Jenkins told CNA that Season 5 is sad at times. It's actually heartbreaking at times, because we know we're getting closer and closer to the cross. We will see some famous events from Scripture, but given his suffering, I think we will also be drawn closer to who Jesus was. One of the creators of The Chosen, Ryan Swanson, said that Season 5 will really seem like a different sort of series. Following the dread and gloom and foreshadowing of Season 4, this is when the wick is lighted. When asked how the writers get ready to depict the significant and historical events of Holy Week, Swanson underlined the need of depending on Scripture and noted that as much as 30% of the Scripture is about this week. The Bible provides a great assist since it contains no other section written as chronologically and with clarity as to the events of the week in time as this week. Fully of it is therefore fully set for us. I consider our challenge to be how we present it, particularly to the initiate, in a fresh manner. Swanson said, "We are trying to tell the story honestly, factually, historically, but also to give it that chosen twist of what were these moments like for people who would have been there." Elizabeth Tabish, the actress playing Mary Magdalene, said she has tried to not think about that too much. She knows what lies ahead for her character and the pivotal events she is involved in. It's intimidating. I truly want to honor that period in the Gospels and do properly. I am therefore a little anxious, she remarked. Regarding getting ready, I believe I will just pray a lot about it. Vanessa Benavent's Mother Mary role will also be going through hardships in Season 5. I still find it difficult to exactly understand how she must have gone through this, Benavent informed CNA. She understands her son needs to carry out his mission, but at the same time he is her son. That's the thing, you as a mother have to learn how to let go of your children. In this situation, you know you're letting him to do something that will meet his end. With my 2024 brain, being a mother myself, it's so humongous, it's so big, and I always go down to her faith must have been just as big, because it's literally every mother's nightmare what she will be going through in the next couple of seasons. While it was still winter when lucky fans were allowed to see the selected Season 4 in movie theaters, it was the beginning of summer when everyone else got to watch the season for free on the selected app and website. Now that it is fall, we are justifiably wondering what will happen to the 5th season of the show. It's great that while many streaming shows tend to drop just 8 episodes every couple of years, The Chosen has been consistently releasing its seasons year after year. Recently, the show's team made a big announcement on their YouTube channel that gives us a solid hint about the new season's release date. Plus, there's a sneak peek of Season 5 to check out. I'm excited to chat about all of this, as you know I love discussing every little update about The Chosen on this channel. This video will so, there's this video that shows some intense footage of Roman soldiers in action. It gives us a glimpse of a pretty rare scene where they kick down a door to make an arrest. And get this, one of the actors is actually a retired SWAT team member. But I'm curious, are they on the hunt for Jesus, or is this about someone else entirely? What do you think? As the same video also goes into the plotline that has been developed for the pilot episode of Season 5, I cannot wait to read your theories in the comments section below. The young governor is attempting to deal with a variety of these issues at the same time. On the one hand, there is his wife Claudia, who continues bringing up the subject. One behind-the-scenes video also focused on him, but this time he is interacting with the Jewish high priest Caius. The clip demonstrates how much The Chosen portrays Pilate as an inexperienced young governor who is easily manipulated by others, despite the fact that in one scene Caiaphas reveals that he has made the decision to arrest Jesus. He does not communicate that decision with Caius. Seeing these strange visions, on the other hand, causes Atticus to become overly frustrated with him, which ultimately leads to an altercation. It appears that the character of Pilate will be further developed in the 5th season. Not even a Pilate. Do you enjoy it? The Chosen portrayal of Pilate and Caiaphas, tell me in the comments, where you may catch a glimpse of a deep dive into Judas, whose plotline will be one of the most significant in Season 5 due to the fact that it's going to be one of the most important. Confirmed that he had betrayed him, the Garden of Gethsemane will be the final scene of the season. In the footage, the writers in Luke demonstrate how his betrayal did not occur all of a sudden, but rather has been a gradual one. Luke, in particular, has a great perspective on his character and the circumstances that led him to the betrayal. He has given up his job, he has given his house to his sister, and he has put all of his chips on the table in Jesus. As a result, he does not really have anyone to whom he can confide, and he is alone, so he does like a prisoner. Just a little bit of a problem, it is only a small amount of money that he takes. The writers also had a great understanding of Judas's character. Judas is always thinking about how he can do the right thing, and his excessive focus on perfection is really detrimental to his spiritual well-being. What he is not yet prepared to do is accept that he has created his own expectations that are not accurate. To tell you the truth, I really appreciate watching these videos since they offer informative commentary and reveal the thinking process that went into the storylines. However, the video that I enjoyed the most was not a commentary video, rather it was the most recent video. In the final days of filming Season 5, the cast and crew shared their feelings while shooting the Last Supper as their last scene. It was heartwarming to witness their emotional goodbyes after such intense moments. Seeing everyone hug Luke Timian, especially knowing he had to film Judas's betrayal as one of his last scenes, was particularly touching. This final video confirmed that filming for Season 5 has officially wrapped up. If Dallas is done with it, he'll let us know. Following the completion of filming, he will go on to assist with the editing of the season, which is the post-production stage that typically takes between 4 and 5 months. They don't just bring all the footage they shot together. They also level the sound, fix the lighting they choose, and add music that makes certain scenes much more impactful. This stage is quite important, considering that the filming of the show ended in August, and post-production should continue until the end of the season. I know that we are all eager to see the new episodes of the show, but I also know that this stage is quite important. During the course of this year, possibly even up until January 2025, although as was the case for the 2 seasons prior to this one, in spite of the fact that a great number of viewers were dissatisfied with the 3-hour showings, it is highly likely that The Chosen Season 5 will be shown in theaters first. This is because theatrical screenings helped the show financially, so they will likely do it again. There is no doubt that the 5th season ought to be released in theaters throughout the month of February, followed by a release date in March on the selected app and website for those individuals who would want to view it gratis, or for people who are unable to visit movie theaters. What are your thoughts on this matter? Take into consideration a release date of March 2025. I am aware that this is a very long time ago. Since the beginning of the show, there has been a debate about whether or not The Chosen is an accurate portrayal of the Bible. Those who watch The Chosen have occasionally voiced their dissatisfaction with the amount of artistic liberties that have been taken, while others have pointed out the absence of significant events, such as the baptism of Jesus. Most recently, the absence of another scene that is perhaps even more significant has been noticed by many. I am referring to the Transfiguration, and you may be wondering if we are ever going to see it in the upcoming seasons of the show. As I mentioned earlier, Dallas and the writing team have already been subjected to criticism for not including the baptism of Jesus. I remember Dallas placing that event in a category of biblical moments that he didn't think he could do well enough. It is understandable that Dallas is being careful with portraying the supernatural. The answer would be no, because Dallas Jenkins believes that it does not have any significance in the story that they are telling with The Chosen. I know that this is controversial. Let's see what Dallas exactly said about this and why he thinks. on screen, but this does not change the fact that people want to see the most significant events in Jesus' life as they are described in the Gospels on screen. This includes the Transfiguration. In the Gospels, the Transfiguration of Jesus occurs after Peter's proclamation and before the raising of Lazarus. In an ideal world, the Transfiguration would have been depicted in Season 4 of The Chosen. However, the raising of Lazarus already took place in Episode 7, so perhaps you are anticipating that the Transfiguration will also be shown as a flashback scene in Season 5. Fans stated in a Facebook post that they wanted Dallas to include the Transfiguration in The Chosen since they thought it to be an important part of Jesus' story. However, Dallas has already closed the door on that possibility. In response, Dallas made this stunning remark: "People keep saying that the Transfiguration would be an important scene, and I'm confused as to why and what purpose it would serve for our story." During an interview, Dallas went into further detail about this topic, and I will show you the video clip in a moment. However, I am really interested in hearing your comments on this matter. What did you think about it? I don't understand how Dallas would miss the opportunity to show a major event that impacted and changed the lives of men like Big James, Peter, and John who were present for the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is very important because it reveals Jesus in full divinity, which in turn is meant to console Peter, Big James, and John and strengthen them during his time on earth. Dallas was being mean when he asked what purpose the Transfiguration would serve the story on the show. Considering that the show is about the lives of the apostles as much as it is about the life of Jesus, I don't make sense. In addition to the apparition of Moses and Elijah with Jesus, the themes of passion and death bring attention to the fact that the messianic promise has been fulfilled. Let us listen to Dallas expound on the reasons he chose not to include the Transfiguration in his presentation. The podcast, Against Current, featured him as a guest, and he talked about this subject during his appearance. In spite of the fact that he brought up the Transfiguration incident, he has not yet made any preparations to recreate it, and most certainly not in the manner in which the Bible depicts it. He is simply not interested in pursuing that idea, despite the fact that we would not change anything about it. I am currently working on a scene in which the face of Jesus is glowing, and to tell you the truth, it reminds me about Return of the Jedi quite a little. If you were to try to persuade me to move in that route, it would take quite a bit of effort, and I just can't envision myself doing that right now. I am being really honest when I say that this is not at all a part of our plan. On the surface, it appears like Dallas's primary focus is demonstrating his devotion to Jesus through all of those lights. It was quite a display for a show that focused on the human side of Jesus, which is something that I completely comprehend. On the other hand, it is rather disheartening to observe that Dallas could not have completely appreciated the significance of the event when he said that it might appear to be out of place. This is not something that should be the case in the show, and it is not something that is found in the Bible either. And do you concur? I have a feeling that Dallas might be having trouble visualizing how to bring the Transfiguration to life on screen, and that he might benefit from working with other people who have a clear vision for it. Incredible things could happen if he is able to pull it off. During the moment of walking on water, he is able to successfully manage the Transfiguration. However, the problem is not only Dallas's opinions about how the scene would look like. It is also about him believing that the Transfiguration does not hold an important place in the story. Let's say as much as the raising of Lazarus in the same interview right after he talked about not wanting to do the Transfiguration. The Season 3 finale did show that The Chosen is ready for big moments and has the budget to sprinkle in a major moment if it wants to. However, the problem is not only Dallas's opinions about how the scene would look like, but it is also about him believing that the Transfiguration does not hold an important place in the story. Lazarus's resuscitation and the significance of this event to the narrative watcher, clearly I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you we're probably going to be covering Lazarus because it's a crucial part of the story for the sake of the disciples, for the sake of the glory of God, and for the sake of the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. Jesus allowed Lazarus to die in the same way that he could have healed him before he died. He allowed him to die so that he could raise him in front of people and demonstrate the glory of God. For the sake of those who were watching, as well as for the sake of his adversaries who, as a result of the resurrection, had reached the official moment like, all right, that's it, no more messing about, he needs to leave. Therefore, that is a significant portion of the narrative, and we are going to make sure that we discuss it with you. On the other hand, there are no major miracles that we would have to include in order to incorporate them into the narrative. In the narrative that Dallas fabricates in his head, the resurrection of Lazarus is a more significant event than the transfiguration occurs. I suppose he believes that it is more important for the story that comes after it, which means that the resurrection of Lazarus is what causes the religious authorities to view Jesus as a greater danger. Nevertheless, why not show both of them? Is there still a possibility that we may see the transfiguration as a flashback scene? Possibly due to the fact that Dallas had previously stated that he would not perform the walking on water scene also, but he ultimately decided to do it and did it flawlessly. Therefore, it is possible that one of his co-writers will be able to convince him to add the incident as a flashback, and we will be able to obtain it as a flashback. Despite the fact that it is a very little likelihood, fingers are still crossed. What happened in The Chosen Season 3, Episode 6? The 6th episode of The Chosen appears to serve as a kind of turning point for the 3rd season of the show. Despite the fact that Episode 6 is juggling a large number of different plotlines, many of these plotlines only received 1 or 2 scenes. This is because they are either providing resolution to the tension that has been built up during the course of Season 3, or they are building the framework for a subsequent narrative line. I will make every effort to cover all of the significant aspects of the episode that are listed below. While Jesus is praying earnestly in the Jesus because of the dreams she has been having, Matthew 27:19. As she looks out the window of her villa, she notices that a number of guys are being crucified. In response to her greeting, she cautions Pilate that if he is too severe, he may incite another uprising. Nevertheless, Pilate disregards her warnings and continues on with his business. When Pilate's wife finds out that he is going to meet with a friend named Atticus, she is taken aback, since she believes that he does not have friends but only strategic acquaintances. In the last part of the episode, we see Atticus arrive at a pavilion that Pilate has set up in a field that is open to the field. In light of the fact that opportunistic revolutionaries could come by and assault, Jesus reprimands Pilate for announcing his position in such an arrogant manner. Pilate asks Atticus to provide him with an update on his activities over the course of the previous year after they have engaged in some light-hearted banter. Pilate makes a joke about wanting to kill Quintus after Atticus mentions that Quintus has been a bit of a problem. However, he later admits that he is unable to do so because Quintus performs an excellent job of preserving revenue. However, Pilate is troubled by Quintus' excessive use of force in putting down uprisings, since it indicates that he himself has to be less forceful in his reaction to the situation. During the time when Atticus is explaining to Pilate the sequence of events that led him to Capernaum, Pilate expresses his belief that Quintus is lacking in experience. Pilate takes pleasure in being in a region that is relatively inconsequential and backwater during a period of relative peace. He even considers the Jews to be charming, with the exception of the terrible high priest Caiaphas. Additionally, he desires for there to be peace, and for Rome and the Jews to continue to be content. After requesting that Atticus go back to Capernaum in order to keep an eye on Jesus, Pilate displays his confidence in Atticus' judgment and assures him that he will pay attention to any intelligence or advice that Atticus may provide. The viewers are reminded of the enormous danger that Jesus and his disciples were taking at this stage in their mission as they see criminals being crucified in the opening sequence of Episode 6. In the very next picture, we see the disciples sharpening knives and spears, which is an indication that they are also aware of the dangers and are looking forward to them with apprehension. When Matthew arrives and inquires about what they are doing, the other apostles explain that if a lady like Veronica was able to push through and touch Jesus without his consent, then other women would be able to do the same thing. This will, of course, give rise to a discussion. Not only do Philip and Nathanael point out that Veronica would not have been healed if she had not come to Jesus, but they also point out that they cannot go around stabbing everyone who wants to touch him. In addition, Matthew and Simon Peter have been subjected to criticism for their friendship with the Romans, such as giving the information to Jesus, but Simon says that he does not want to engage himself because he wants to protect Jesus. After a few scenes have passed, the disciples' worry is awakened when a man arrives from the Decapolis in the middle of the night with a message for Philip and Andrew. More on this will be discussed below. And once more, when emissaries from John the Baptist arrive, the disciples are concerned about whether or not they are sent by John the Baptist. With the intention of confronting the zealots who are chasing him, Simon the Zealot travels to the tent city. Instantaneously, he discovers that he is encircled. On the other side, rather of engaging in a fight, he falls to his knees, prays, and reveals to the zealots that he has abandoned the order in order to follow the Messiah, since the kingdom of heaven is becoming closer. Due to the fact that Gaius is in close proximity, they refrain from attacking while simultaneously making fun of Simon and questioning the reason why Rome is still in control if the Messiah has arrived. The Messiah has not arrived in the manner that they had anticipated, according to Simon's explanation. Despite this, Simon declares that he has renounced his dagger and stopped following the path of violence after seeing his brother recover from his injuries. Once Jesus has returned to town, he immediately begins to perform miracles in the vicinity of the location where Simon and the zealots are currently engaged in their standoff. Evidently, the chief zealot is filled with admiration. As well as witnessing Jesus' interaction with the local Pharisee, he was present throughout the response that Jesus gave to John's disciples. During the time that Jesus is urging people to not ignore the call to repentance and salvation that he is presenting, the zealot appears to be paying attention. After that, Simon inquires of the zealot whether or not he comprehends the situation at this point. According to the zealot, he has a limited understanding of the situation, but he is aware that Simon Z has not demonstrated a lack of faith. In spite of the fact that some of the other assassins appear to be less convinced, the chief zealot asserts that he must discover his own way and swears to return to the order in order to tell what he has personally witnessed. At the beginning of the 6th episode, Gaius makes his way to Quintus' headquarters. After inquiring as to whether or not Gaius has ever had a younger brother who has been a snitch, Quintus explains that Atticus is going to go to Pilate in order to snitch on him. This is unfortunate news for Quintus because he will want Pilate's support in order to advance in his career at any point in the future. Although Gaius tries to convince Quintus that his track record speaks for itself, Quintus is not reassured and instead criticizes Gaius for his inability to maintain control of the tent city through his actions. In the 2nd episode, Atticus offered a scheme to impose taxes on the people who lived in tents. However, the plan was unsuccessful since none of the people had any money and the preacher, who is Jesus, had returned, generating even more spectacle and mayhem. Gaius asks Quintus how he might set things right, and Quintus advises him, in a half-joking manner, that he could kill Jesus. However, Quintus later admits that this would lead to a revolution and other problems. In its place, he instructs Gaius to eradicate the tent city by locating pre-existing regulations that he is able to enforce, for example, construction codes and health codes, in order to expel the inhabitants. The manner in which Gaius reacts to Quintus is icy and unfeeling. In the future, we witness Gaius conducting a patrol in the tent city. On the other hand, after witnessing the predicament of the people, Gaius decides to assist the pilgrims rather than force them to leave. The fact that Jesus begins to perform miracles in the vicinity is still another thing that impresses him. However, when the tensions between Jesus and the Pharisee begin to build, he uses the restrictions that Quintus has put on meetings of 25 or more in order to prevent the conflict from becoming more severe. When the Pharisee continues to harass Jesus, he even pulls his sword on him despite his best efforts. The disciples of John the Baptist hold a meeting with Simon Peter, James, and John, who put them through a series of tests to see whether or not they are spies with the intention of bringing down Jesus. However, even when they have established their identities, they are all required to wait for Jesus to come to town before John can give his message to them. They make their way through the crowd to the location where Jesus is performing miraculous healings, healing the blind, the mute, and the lame. When they hear the rumor that Jesus is returning, they make their way there. The crowd also contains a number of other characters, including the angry Pharisee from episode 5, Gaius, the Zealot, Yusuf, Jairus, and Barnaby, the man with a limp from season 1. Simon urges the disciples of John to convey their message to Jesus during their conversation. They are among the disciples who heard John refer to him as the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. John 1:26-34. He recognizes them as being among those disciples. It is difficult for the disciples of John to feel comfortable expressing their message in such a public setting. But Simon Peter is adamant that this is the appropriate time. John is interested in determining whether or not Jesus is, in fact, the one who is to come, also known as the Messiah, or whether or not they should look for someone else. In response to the query, Jesus does not appear to be bothered by it, but rather makes the connotation of the Messiah clear. He emphasizes to the crowd that John's impatience is completely human and understandable. He instructs them to report everything they have witnessed to John, including the addition of the deceased to the category of miracles, and to reassure John that all will be okay. In front of the audience, the local Pharisee expresses his outrage and accuses Jesus of speaking in a demonic manner. In contrast to the Pharisees, Jesus uses this opportunity to make it clear that he is not rebuking John despite the fact that he acknowledges John's baptism and zeal. In his declaration, he asserts that John is the forerunner that was promised in Isaiah 40:3-5 and Malachi 3:5. In light of the fact that John has referred to the Pharisees as vipers, Matthew 3:7, and has been seen as demonic, the Pharisee takes problem with this. Jesus stresses on John's greatness, but he also states that, as John would himself confess, the least in the kingdom is far greater. This is something that John would admit. He then goes on to compare the Pharisees to spoilt children who refuse to participate in any kind of play, regardless of whether it is a make-believe wedding or a funeral. Both John's solemnity and Jesus' pleasure will be rejected by the Pharisees. They will not accept anything. They assert that they are wise, but the only way to prove their wisdom is via their actions. Jesus implores those who are listening to him to not disregard the message of redemption and repentance, as well as the evidence of God's kingdom in the lives that they have witnessed being transformed. Despite the fact that the local Pharisee is furious and prepared to intensify the debate, Jairus and Yosef bring to their attention the fact that they are in risk of violating the prohibition on gatherings of a large number of people. They were able to put an end to the situation with Gaius' assistance before it could become too intense. A little while later, Jesus is seen strolling alongside John, Big James, and Simon Peter. The presence of Pharisees, as Simon points out, makes miracles a more enjoyable experience. Due to the rising temperature, James believes that they ought to get Jesus out of town as soon as possible. When Barnaby and Shula enter the room, their talk is abruptly cut off. After witnessing Jesus treat a blind person, Barnaby came to the conclusion that he need to go and inquire about the possibility of Jesus healing Shula as well. Jesus inquires of Shula as to why she has not inquired as of yet. She acknowledges that despite the fact that she has faith in him, she has been very terrified. He then heals her eyes, and everyone is filled with joy. He did this after praising their love and trust. Regarding Barnaby, Shula inquires. In spite of the fact that he is willing to walk her home, Barnaby claims that he came to assist her and not themselves. However, as they are leaving, Barnaby comes to the realization that his leg has been healed, and he immediately returns to thank Jesus. After that, they make their way back home at a very rapid pace. Simon makes the observation that this miracle was just as enjoyable even when there was no Pharisee present. While the disciples are sleeping in Simon Peter's house in the middle of the night, a young guy uses a knife to break through a window and enter the house. All of the apostles are roused from their sleep by the sound of his entrance, and they immediately demand to know. During the time that Andrew and Philip were on their missionary tour, he was one of the individuals who would listen to them preach. His name is Leander. Despite the fact that Andrew and Philip followed Jesus' instructions to speak primarily to Jews, there are Greeks and other non-Jews who have heard the word and as a result have turned away from the Olympian gods and have placed their faith in Jesus. This has caused a commotion in the Decapolis region, with brothers turning against one another as a result of the situation. In addition, the teaching that Andrew and Philip imparted was insufficient, and individuals who have believed in them need to acquire additional knowledge. Leander asks them to come back and continue what they started. All of this is a setup for John 12:20-26, in which Greeks who are visiting Jerusalem and interested in meeting Jesus come directly to Andrew and Philip. When Mary is in the middle of writing Ramah a letter, asking for her guidance on local farmers, Tamar walks in and spits out an olive, commenting on how awful it is. Mary is busy writing Ramah a letter. After observing that Mary is irritated with her, Tamar inquires as to what is taking place. Mary is irritated by the manner in which Tamar, a woman, behaved impolitely towards Zebedee, an older man. When Tamar explains that their work with the olives is their contribution to the ministry and that it is vital, Mary tells out that they have more to provide than just their work, that is, a positive attitude. It is at this time that the conversation becomes quite profound. Mary expresses her frustration at the fact that she was required to come to Jesus while under the influence of a demon and while she was inebriated. On the other hand, Tamar was able to force her way into the company with minimal difficulty and was lauded for her faith. She expresses her desire for Tamar to have a more humble attitude and describes how she herself always goes through the feeling that she is never enough. Tamar's response is that she is adamant that Mary is incredible, and she asks Mary why she is unable to recognize this. Tamar is reprimanded by Mary for her lack of interest, her sense of entitlement, and her aggressiveness. Mary believes that they are not supposed to do what they are doing. Tamar expresses her sorrow for Mary's humiliation and explains that due to the fact that she has received forgiveness from Jesus, she does not need to keep on to their shame. Tamar is the one who is going to speak up now. She describes how, despite the fact that she is not a Jew, she has experienced a significant amount of suffering. As a result of tribal conflict, her nation is currently in a state of war. She learnt that her family, along with the rest of her community, had been wiped off by a rival tribe on her most recent visit. She also learnt that the rest of her village had been destroyed. A necklace that she had recovered was discovered on the body of her mother. Despite the fact that it is the only thing she has left, it still bears the blood of her mother. It is for this reason that she has been so irritated throughout the entirety of Season 3 by Mary's persistent demands that she sell it. Mary is in a state of mourning. She is heartbroken by the loss of her father and hopes that she could still have a piece of him to cling to. She pleads for pardon when she reveals that she has been comparing her own weakness, shame, and self-loathing to Tamar's strength, boldness, and she says that she has been doing so. After embracing one another, the two come up with a strategy to enhance the olive grove. Later on, Zebedee gets together with Mary and Tamar after they have gone to see a farmer in the neighborhood. The procedures that they need to carry out in order to enhance the quality of the soil in the olive grove have been figured out. Despite this, they need to purchase sulfur. A visit to the money box is made by Mary. During her search of the interior, she discovers that sacks of money have been stolen, and in their place are tassels. My initial hypothesis was that Judas had borrowed money. However, episode 7 ultimately explains that the tassels belong to Matthew. Despite this, she is able to locate the necessary funds, and they proceed to acquire the necessary materials. When Simon is finally able to spend some time at home with Eden, he makes an effort to pour praise on her while also praising her cuisine. However, she is not going to accept it. In response to James and John's request for his assistance in discerning whether or not the messengers of John are genuine, Simon assures them that they can wait for his information. It is his hope that Eden will be impressed by his ability to decline work opportunities. Nevertheless, she has already walked away from the table. After experiencing a great deal, Simon goes back to his house the following evening. He starts to tell Eden about all that took place, but Eden interrupts him and tells him that she was unable to save the baby. Due to the fact that he was completely unaware that she was pregnant, Simon feels perplexed. Despite the fact that he made the mistake of asking Eden whether she was working too hard, she manages to call him out on his mistake. She adds that she has been keeping the miscarriage a secret because she did not want to cause him to feel regret for his decision to follow Jesus. However, she has come to the realization that she cannot withhold this information from herself. Eden wonders if Simon is genuinely just upset about what took place, despite the fact that he is upset as a result of the fact that it has been weeks since she told him about it. In her explanation, she reveals that the mistake he made was that he did nothing at all when he turned around. Despite the fact that she tells him to keep Jesus out of the situation, Simon implies that she is displeased that he was on mission. Eden takes Simon by surprise by offering him comfort, as she has had more time to comprehend the situation. After Simon has finally recovered from his initial shock and wrath, he poses the question, why, to God? Episode 6 of the third season of The Chosen, a review. it was more difficult to summarize the storyline of Episode 6 of The Chosen Season 3 than it was for the previous episodes. This was not just due to the fact that there was a lot going on, but also because there wasn't as much dramatic and thematic unity as there was in the prior episodes. You have surely seen how frequently I have brought up the significance of unity, whether it be in my appreciation of Season 3 of The Chosen or in my criticism of Season 2. If you have been reading my blog for quite some time, you have probably discovered this. In addition, I believe that a little bit more unity would have been beneficial, which might have been accomplished by either rearranging some of the narratives or developing a more distinct through line. In spite of this, I do not believe that the lack of cohesiveness that occurred in Episode 6 was ultimately catastrophic. In large part, this is due to the fact that this episode appears to represent a turning point, and as a result, it is able to resolve a significant number of the storylines that have been progressively established throughout the course of Season 3, while also briefly introducing new storylines that will be resolved in the season finale or possibly even in Season 4. I would much rather have an episode that seems crammed and chaotic than a bunch of independent episodes and a season that feels fragmented. In the end, I am willing to tolerate an episode that feels crammed and chaotic because the show is juggling so many narrative lines that span the entire season. With the exception of that one tiny criticism, I could not find a great deal to complain about in Episode 6, and there were a great deal of things that I loved experiencing. I was quite pleased by the show's ability to transform Jesus' speech about John the Baptist into an interesting set piece in its own right, while also progressing various side narratives through the emotions of the individuals who were watching. This was a very impressive feat. Something quite similar was done by the program with the Sermon on the Mount, but this particular scene was somewhat more complicated. Pilate is something that I am looking forward to seeing more of. When compared to what I've seen in previous adaptations, he has a more charismatic personality, which is interesting. Pilate is not a violent savage who is out for blood, but he is also not an innocent man who is in a difficult situation. I have never been able to figure out what to make of the portrait of Pilate that is found in the Bible. I am able to comprehend how the Pilate that we witnessed in Episode 6 may be fitted into the story that is presented to us in the Gospels. The dialogue that took place between Tamar and Mary Magdalene provided several layers of richness to both of their characters and made them feel extremely relatable. Both of the actresses gave outstanding performances. Regarding the exchange that took place between Eben and Simon Peter, I concur. A clean bow would have been an easy way for the program to wrap up their problems, but they chose not to. In its place, both characters have been given the opportunity to make slow progress while simultaneously reacting to their loss in a manner that is real and untidy. Once more, Lara Silva delivered an outstanding performance. Since Simon Z is not one of the central apostles, it was a pleasant surprise to see him receive some attention from the media. The meeting with the Zealots was tense, and to be honest, I had no idea what to anticipate going into it. The scenario involving Shula and Barnaby was really touching. A wonderful conclusion for two side characters that are immensely lovable. 6th episode of the 3rd season of The Chosen, Key Themes. During my examination of Episode 5, I observed that the apostles were becoming increasingly suspicious of one another and frightening of one another. The uneasiness that the apostles are experiencing is brought into much more light in Episode 6. Their anxiety manifests itself in inconspicuous ways, such as the fact that the apostles must determine whether or not John's disciples are genuine, and that Big James asserts that Jesus ought to leave town as soon as possible. In the moment where the apostles are sharpening knives, however, we witness them getting themselves ready to engage in physical violence in order to protect Jesus. This is the scene in which it becomes most evident. The argument regarding whether or not they ought to have attacked Veronica in order to prevent her from touching Jesus against his will is particularly alarming and exemplifies how the apostles are not in sync with Jesus. When Jesus eventually explains that he intends to go get crucified, it is going to be completely incomprehensible to them. It is also going to be difficult for certain apostles to join the Jesus movement when it expands to include their Roman oppressors. This is something that we were reminded of when we heard questions raised once again regarding the positive relationship that Simon Peter and Matthew had with a Roman Gaius. My guess is that this is the reason why the program is preparing for a trip to the Decapolis, where the apostles will be compelled to confront their anti-Gentile biases and suspicions. Given that he is in the process of determining how to react to the danger posed by his zealot pursuers, Simon Z serves as the main point of this theme. The fact that he chose not to resort to violence, but rather to confront his adversaries by quietly declaring the Messiah places him in a position of superiority to the other apostles, with the exception of Philip and little James, who appear to be more inclined towards peace. The zealots themselves serve as a funhouse mirror for the apostles, representing what the apostles might become if their tendency towards violence and suspicion continue to grow without being addressed. Additionally, Quintus and Pilate offer us glimpses into the ways in which worry and suspicion might result in the use of violent self-defense strategy. Both of them are concerned about getting in trouble with their superiors, and this concern drives them to resort to the use of harsh force, for example, the crucifixion, discussions of putting down revolts forcefully, or at the very least to consider doing so, for example, Quintus' suggestion that he should kill Jesus of Nazareth. On the other hand, Gaius' journey throughout Season 3 has resulted in his becoming less wary of Jews and becoming friends with them. Instead of following Quintus' lead and partaking in the violent suppression of the tent city, he shows sympathy for the people who live in the tents. In Episode 6, characters who are at their worst are preoccupied with distrust, fear, and the desire to protect themselves. Characters who are at their finest, on the other hand, are willing to listen to and see the miseries of others and are inspired by compassion and empathy. It is in the very first scene that this contrast between self-protective characters and compassionate characters is established. Pilate's wife sees the pain of Jesus via vision and the suffering of the crucified criminals and feels compassion for them. On the other hand, Pilate is only concerned about the political calculus of protecting his own position. Once more, in the scene that follows, we see a difference between those who are focused on the security risk that is posed by Veronica's activities in Episode 5 and Philip, who appears to feel compassion for her predicament. In the same scenario, Nathanael appears to recognize that little James will be more receptive to little James's requests for information because of little James's reputation for being compassionate and attentive to others. It should come as no surprise that the scenario in which Mary Magdalene and Tamar interact, as well as the moment in which Simon Peter and Eben interact, shine the most light on the significance of compassion and attentiveness. A fully empathetic listener is not present in either of the scenes, which is an intriguing fact to consider. The two of them, Mary and Tamar, as well as Simon and Eben, had a hard time listening to one another. Every single character has suffered a significant amount of pain, which makes it challenging for them to show compassion and listen to one another inside the story. The drama of these situations lies in the fact that in order to arrive at a moment of mutual compassion and understanding, each pair must first make their way through the process of listening in an imperfect manner, taking one step forward and 2 steps back. In Episode 6, if there is a person that exemplifies compassion beyond all others, it is Barnaby that stands out. The majority of people who find themselves in his position would have a difficult time feeling compassion for other people because they would be preoccupied with their own misery. Barnaby, on the other hand, does not take into consideration his own wound because he is giving his whole attention to the wound that his blind companion Shula has sustained. The fact that Jesus chooses to cure him as well is what makes the experience so profoundly joyful. Throughout the entirety of Episode 6, the subject of vision and blindness is brought up on several occasions. At other times, the absence of vision or blindness is a possibility. John and Thomas are mentioned by the disciples as having the ability to heal a blind person. It is shown to Matthew by Simon Peter that he is able to use his pen to poke someone in the eye. We are shown with a number of close-up views of people observing Jesus. The eyes of a blind youngster are healed by Jesus. Jesus instructs John the Baptist's messengers to convey to him the means by which the visual impaired can be cured. During the process of healing Shula, Jesus requests to view her face first. Jesus restores health to Shula's eyes. After she has been healed, Jesus urges Shula to make eye contact with him. Vision and blindness are also used as metaphors on multiple occasions, including the following. Using the example of how John and Thomas were able to heal a blind man, the apostles make a joke about whether or not Matthew needs to be healed, despite the fact that he does not comprehend the reason why they are sharpening swords. Pilate says Atticus, "I can't see 10 cubits in front of my face most days." This is a statement that he makes in order to describe the difficulty he has in navigating life. For example, when one of the other assassins threatens Simon Z, even after they have seen Jesus, the chief zealot responds by saying, "Are you blind?" This Simon Z is not a traitor. Furthermore, in addition to these instances in which vision or blindness are specifically mentioned, there are a number of instances in which characters have their eyes opened in a metaphorical or spiritual sense. Pilate's wife receives a glimpse into the future of the body. Together, Mary Magdalene and Tamar have a clearer understanding of both themselves and each other. During their time in the Decapolis, Andrew and Philip are able to observe the results of their preaching. Simon Peter is aware of what has been taking place in Eden, but he appears to be oblivious to the plan that God has for the world, and he asks, why? It is clear to Gaius what he must accomplish in the tent city. Therefore, what is the difference between seeing, being blind, and obtaining healed sight? Being blind appears to be associated with suspicion, zealots, Pharisees, and the apostles, or self-focus and hubris, Simon Peter, Mary Magdalene/Tamar. It would appear that receiving sight is connected to listening and compassion, once more Mary and Tamar Gaius. As we move forward, I anticipate that the Chosen will continue to investigate these metaphors and ideas in greater depth. This is especially true when considering the frequency with which the Gospels use the metaphor of vision, blindness, and healing, for example, Mark 8:22-38 and John 9. Comparison between the kingdom of disruption with the empire of peace. There is a strong temptation for contemporary Christians to portray the Roman Empire as a fully terrible and tyrannical group of rulers. The fact that Pilate appears to have a genuine interest in advancing peace and the common good is one of the things that makes him such a compelling character in episode 6. I don't believe that he is being dishonest when he waxes poetic to Atticus about how much he adores Judea and its people and how he only wants to help them sate Rome. He is just trying to help them satisfy Rome. I have no doubt that he, like many other Roman leaders, is motivated by good intentions, and I am also certain that he has been successful in bringing about positive outcomes for the people he is controlling. When compared to the other episodes, episode 6 focuses on the upheaval and chaos that has been caused by the Jesus movement. The apostles are informed by Leander that the entire Decapolis is ablaze as a result of the fact that Gentiles are fleeing the pagan temples and turning to the gospel. One of the lines that is told to us is that it is brother against brother, which is reminiscent of the famous proclamation that Jesus made. Be not under the impression that I have arrived on earth to bring about peace. I am not here to bring peace. Rather, I have brought a sword. My purpose is to bring about a situation in which a man is pitted against his father, a daughter pitted against her mother, and a daughter-in-law pitted against her mother-in-law. And a person's friends and family members will be his or her greatest adversaries. Exegesis of Matthew 10:34-36. When seen from a surface level, Rome looks to be the protector of peace, sometimes known as the Pax Romana, but the kingdom of Jesus appears to be a source of disorder and strife. However, upon deeper examination, we see that the Roman peace is founded on the violent repression of prospective adversaries, whereas the development of the kingdom of Jesus is due to disciples like as Simon Z who refuse to protect themselves and instead confront their adversaries in a self-sacrificing manner while offering compassion. I've been thinking about the snake armlet that Pilate wears at the beginning of episode 6, which is a completely visible piece of jewelry. In light of the fact that Pilate is portrayed in The Chosen as being fairly personable and even likable, the armlet serves as a clear reminder to viewers that he is, in the end, a snake. It is likely that he will bite Jesus, just like the snake that we saw in the vision that we had in Gethsemane. To my mind, however, there is a more profound significance. In the 3rd chapter of Genesis, the snake that connives Adam and Eve offers them a favorable consequence, the capacity to distinguish between good and evil, in order to convince them to reject God's instructions and engage in destructive behavior. There are various ways in which Rome and Babylon, along with all of the other major kingdoms of this globe, engage in the same behavior. They provide positive consequences, order, peace, and economic flourishing, in exchange for the human race's participation in immoral activities, such as the violent suppression of opponents and the demand for worship. On the other hand, the kingdom of God is dedicated to doing what is right, expressing compassion and love for those who are opposed to it, and granting forgiveness, despite the fact that there may be unfavorable results in the near term. One thing that will pique my interest is the extent to which the chosen delves into these relationships and the contrast between the tranquility that Pilate maintains and the disruption that Jesus brings about.
bustling heart city, many stories unfold unseen. Here, a lone figure braves the cold, a silent testament to hardship. Meanwhile, another life rushes by. A world of appointments, ambition, and endless pursuits, often oblivious to the silent struggles nearby. But at times, a moment of pause allows for a different kind of sight. A connection forms, transcending the usual boundaries of daily life. A decision is made, a step taken, bridging the gap between two very different realities. It's a small act, but one that holds immense potential. A simple act of kindness, a shared moment of humanity, can illuminate the darkest corners. It reminds us that compassion truly has the power to connect us all. In the bustling